Hey there, paranormal kids. I'm the Comics Kid 2099 here to talk about the Superman the Animated Series episode Where There's Smoke. So strap in because there will be spoilers before I get into the main part of the review itself. A mysterious woman with pyrokinetic abilities sets fire to a yacht that Clark Kent is at, and Superman puts out the fire. As he investigates, he finds out the woman is Volcana and was once a student at a school for gifted youngsters, but she was taken away by government men and turned into an unwilling agent. She got away and became a thief, and now Superman has to stop the government from experimenting on her and also stop her from her thievery. Cue credits. So if you know anything about me at all, you know that this episode is basically tailor-made to fit my interests. It's got everything I love in genre fiction. Sinister government organizations, sexy femme fatales, paranormal metahumans. Heck, this episode has all the trappings of the X-Men distilled in 20 minutes, and you probably know how much I love the X-Men, so that is awesome. So one of my biggest gripes with this episode right out the gate is why didn't we get more of this stuff in this series? I know we're approaching the end of this series, so I'm not saying it would have been feasible to do another episode with any of the elements in this episode again so soon, especially with the Fourth World stuff still looming in this series that needs to be paid off in some way, which it will be in the series finale. But the DCAU is a big place, and in Justice League or Batman Beyond, we never again see Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters or their bald head master. We never see this particular version of the sinister government organization, although we do see other similar sects in other episodes. Sure, we do get to see Volcana in the Justice League episode Only a Dream, but that's just a non-speaking cameo, and we're never told why she returned to a life of crime. It would have made a lot of sense to have reused the Xavier School Clark visits here in the Batman Beyond episode Mind Games. There we have the Brain Trust, a group of paranormals who believe that they are better than the rest of humanity, and we're even told that they set up fake schools to find paranormals and kidnap them for their own purposes. That's exactly what faux Nick Fury and his group do with Volcana here. Seems like we could have had a quick connection between that organization and the one we see in this episode. And it's not just that I like a lot of the stuff in this episode and I want to see more of it. I also think this episode ends pretty abruptly, and I feel like we needed some more of these elements in later episodes of the DCAU to give it a better send-off. For example, after faux Nick Fury has kidnapped Volcana again, she accidentally blows up the installation and presumably all of the people inside, and Superman seems pretty okay with what she did and gives her her own island where she can just hang out for the rest of her life until she goes back to a life of crime by the time we get to the Justice League series. And maybe it's just that I'm a gigantic introvert that doesn't like being around humans for long periods of time, but this air quotes imprisonment doesn't seem like much of one. She even says that it's not that bad, and Superman says the only reason that she's here is because a women's prison wouldn't hold her. But Star Labs is still a thing, right? They temporarily imprisoned Parasite at one point, and then the prison they eventually put him in was specially adapted to hold him. So why couldn't they do that with Volcana? I get it, Superman has seen some hard evidence that the authorities cannot be trusted since they are the ones who treated Volcana so poorly in the first place. And when Superman says that the courts can deal with faux Nick Fury, I reacted the same way Volcana did. The courts are part of the system that acted in a very villainous way in regards to Volcana. The government ruined her life. Why on earth would she put trust in the courts? You know, part of that government. So while Clark's ordinary, wholesome Boy Scout approach to everything doesn't work in this situation, him doing nothing at all doesn't work either. Or rather, him basically giving Volcana a permanent vacation where she doesn't have to work or pay taxes or do any of the crappy stuff that's part of living for us normal folks, that doesn't work. In fact, it works even less than if he did nothing at all. Even if the minds behind the DCAU chose to never revisit the Xavier School or the evil government people who I guess were burned alive and that was the end of that, this episode still felt like it needed an extra 3 minutes to properly handle how Superman reacts to all of this. Superman normally lives in a more sunlit world where, yes, crime exists, but it's a tiny bit more black and white. Sure, as far as the world is concerned, Lex Luthor is a golden child who can do no wrong, and Superman knows differently and is powerless to do anything to stop Lex most of the time. But even that seems more cut and dry than this. Superman, as a fictional character, used to be very much an authority figure who regularly cautioned kids to always listen to their government. But in a post-Watergate world, Superman can never be that again. But it's hard because that's almost inextricable to his character. I mean, Superman holding a bald eagle on his arm or holding the American flag is almost as iconic as the phone booth or his logo. So when you put him in a situation like this episode, where the government is the villain, and yes, I know Superman has a throwaway line that the government isn't funding these guys anymore, so technically the government isn't the bad guy in this episode, but the government was funding them at one time, so it's kind of a moot point. It's difficult to wrap that up easily and say that Superman is totally okay with Volcana incinerating several human beings. I'm not saying this episode should have been a two-parter, which seems to usually be my answer when an episode seems too full like this one does, but I do think that we needed more than what we got. So overall, I really enjoyed this episode for a lot of the surface elements, but as a story, story, I don't think that it works very well. It needs more meat to it that this structure doesn't have room for. But what did you guys think of the episode and of my review? Let me know in the comments, and in the meantime, I'll be back next week to talk about another Superman the Animated Series episode. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.